Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So this is, to me, going to be a very profound message that passed through me through meditation this morning. I've been fighting a headache. I don't want to say fighting because that's you can't fight a headache. Uh, a migraine. I talked about this a little bit in my other videos. I started having a migraine around Tuesday. There's an upcoming spiritual gathering, and there's often cleaning. I mean, there's always cleaning that goes before these gatherings, and they often come in discomfort and illnesses and aggravation and either emotional, like you go through emotional crises, or you have physical crisis. In this case, there's a headache. Right? I've been having less and less migraines over the years, and they've been less in severity, so much so that I can usually work through them and have a fairly functional day. But this one, I got on Tuesday, felt better on Wednesday. Then Wednesday night, it kind of sort of coming back. It was on one side of the base of my skull, but it's also the nausea and the lack of serotonin that really is the killer. The pain isn't so bad anymore for me. It's just it's like, I don't want to even call it depression. It's a lack of, just any kind of positive feeling or energy, happiness. And then last night, it's yesterday, Friday, it went away and had incredible meditation. We have these 9 p.m. meditations. And then I woke up in the middle of the night, Friday night, Saturday morning, and my headache was coming back. Like I had the headache again. I somehow was sleeping. It came back, which is fucked because usually sleep used to, I used to be able to, reset and sleep, but now it's the opposite was happening. And then I woke up and meditated again. Um, just had a good meditation, and the headache sort of subsided and went away, which was good. And I feel fairly positive today. It's still maybe lingering there, so we'll see, but that's neither here nor there. But I had this profound meditation this morning about like something I've never talked about in this way and in this depth or never thought about personally. And it's something that everybody should know. So people say to some people, oh, you don't have a soul. You're soulless, right? This is something where people will think of somebody as completely evil and say they're soulless. But you can't exist without a soul, right? Your body is temporary. People often say, oh, you have such a great soul, or this person has soul, or whatever. But soul is mandatory. Your body is not. Your body's temporary. Like there's a saying that you are a soul and you have a body. Like there's some bumper sticker new age thing, but it's a true statement. You have a soul, you are a soul. You are a soul and you have a body temporarily. And so your soul, if there is a such thing as a soul, which for me I've had overwhelming experience and evidence of a soul. And so for me it's a no-brainer. So if there is a soul, and each person has to figure that out for themselves, because something's an idea until you know it, right? Like you either know you have a soul or you don't. Like you might think you have one, you might hope you have one, whatever. You might hope you are one because that's what it is. But, most people don't think about it all that much. They don't do anything in terms of pursuing a relationship with the soul and understanding the nature of having a soul. What does having a soul mean, right? Because what having a soul means is your body is a temporary situation, and your body is an illusion of what you really are. Your body is a grosser form. So when I talk about, to understand this, people, what I'm going to talk about here is in the Sajmark system, God is the most subtle. So love energy is the most subtle thing in the world, in the universe. Everything else is a grosser form of love, of God. So God is the fundamental building block. When you feel love energy, that's God. And that's the most subtle thing. So I talk about this quite often in many different videos, Journey Series 1s, other places, where you can go without food for 40 days, something, whatever it is. There's some period of time you can go without food, and then you die. But it's many days. Water, 3-4 days. Air, 10, 15 minutes, no matter what the record is, right? And food is grosser than water. Water is grosser than air. And air is grosser than love. And without love, you can't exist. So that some place in your etheric body, your physical body, there's God's love, and that's the soul. also the soul energy, which is the most subtle. And that's you in your purest, refined state. And then you have these other subtle bodies. This is something from ancient yogic understanding, and this is, every religion should teach this, the stuff about the subtle bodies, right? So I looked this up on one of these, the Gemini thing. And in the yogic and Vedantic philosophy, subtle bodies are non-physical aspects of a person, including consciousness, chit, the mind, manas, the intellect, Buddha, and the ego, Ankar, which function with a vibrational field. These subtle bodies are part of the subtle body. There's also other subtle bodies as well, and spiritual points and things in this system, but that's the basic ones. Also known as the astral or mental body, alongside with the physical body and the causal body. The causal body is the innermost body, veiling the Atman, or the true self. The subtle body evolves through spiritual practice, purifying and simplifying itself, and is connected to the soul. And that's a great even for an AI, this AI bot, like an AI bot, which doesn't have a soul and doesn't have subtle bodies, like to be able to comb together that explanation. It's a great explanation, better than the one that I would have said from memory. And that's the danger of AI, because it's become so much easier than calling things up and remembering things. But anyways, it's a good explanation. But you have these subtle bodies, right, that manifest into, and these subtle bodies are grosser than the Atman, the soul, the causal body. The causal body is the covering of the soul that manifests into your physical body. And so it's the soul inside of you. And then you have these other layers of consciousness, right? These various layers of consciousness that are part of that, right? The ego, Ankar, the intellect, Buddha, the chit, consciousness, and the mind, manas. These are all fields of energy that create your mind, your psychological makeup, your who you are as a person, your identity, these things. And those things are more subtle than your physical body, but they reside in your physical body. And without a physical body, these things only exist in sort of potential when you're just a soul. These things are, potential within a soul that then manifests into a body. But then you come into your body, right? You are born into this body, and you are unaware, at least, when you're a baby, maybe there's some awareness. But this is different. You have to penetrate to a much more subtle level. There's grosser and subtle, right? God is subtle. And then there's grosser forms of existence, manifestation of the divinity in a grosser form. Something that is, I don't want to say it's not perverted, but it's a perversion. It is a knockoff, or some grosser level of your pure state of who you are as a spiritual being, right? So this is kind of the introduction, and I'm going to get to something that I haven't talked about. This is, this profound information that came to me about, body and body consciousness. And so, a little bit more of the introduction. So you come into your physical body, and you now have senses, and it kind of blows your soul away, because your soul doesn't have the ability to see. It doesn't have eyes. It doesn't have, in terms of visual perception, and there isn't really anything to see if you're in an etheric world. Like things, there's no materiality there. And so now you see things, and you experience existence in a physical form. And you have colors and smells, and you can hear things, and you have this beautiful world here that's got so much abundance of sensory stimulation, right? And then you have physical needs, like you're hungry, and you have to eat, and you have to breathe, and you have to have comfort, warmth, or whatever it is, right? It gets too cold, it gets too hot. Like your body now has this thing, the survival mechanism. You have to survive, and there are things you need to survive, and these things are many of them are pleasurable, and then you have to reproduce, and the sexual component of a physical being. I've talked about this in the past. So what you have is an overwhelmingly strong sexual urge, because in the divine system, there's the proliferation of life. There has to be more and more life, right? This is, be fruitful and multiply in the biblical way of explaining it. But there has to be more. You have to have continuation of life, right? There needs to be, there's also soul energy. That people don't understand that, especially around women who are, going to get pregnant soon. The soul comes to the woman, the baby's soul. This is why women get so depressed when they have miscarriages and abortions and things like this. The soul of the baby circulates around and is present with the mother so it can manifest its body. And so you have this soul that wants to be born. And so you have divine forces that are pushing you towards reproduction. And then you have this overwhelmingly strong biological need to reproduce, right? And, within nature, you'll see this with animals, especially, if you're living in a country area. Like we see coyotes only when there's mating season. You'll see animals like there's toads everywhere. We had these toads. I showed a video of these toads in our pond. And they, it was like my wife was calling it a pool party, right? There was just all these toads, making this noise. It was like it just had rained. And we'd never seen this before. And this was a big year for toads. And whether we've been traveling or we didn't go out on this specific day, it was like a one-day event, a big event. And now I have a bunch of videos. I'm going to do an update. There's all these little tadpoles that are baby toads that are, going to, manifest their existence, right? Proliferate the toad population. And so the toads, which are, a lot of these animals are very secret. You never see them. But the one time you will see them is in mating season, right? Because of the strong urge to mate, they risk their lives, to mate and put themselves in jeopardy. We have these big egrets that come into our ponds and, other creatures, whatever, raccoons, whatever it might be. And these animals are hiding, most of the year, but they come out because they have to mate. And they, make themselves known. They let everybody know where they are by making some sort of a sound. You have these colorful birds that'll flash their, we have these red-winged blackbirds that flash their red-spotted wings and make a loud sound, make this sound. And then we have mourning doves that are out there making sounds, letting, the opposite sex knows they're available. And they put themselves at great risk of predators that can now hear them and see them when they normally would be hidden, right? Because that's the power of the sexual urge and the, that's hardwired into biological creatures, right? So you see this. You see the way that reproduction is, this driving force between the proliferation of life. And you see how much people get in trouble because of this. I'm going to cover Shannon Sharpe a little bit, like I said in this video, some other things. This video will be up on Monday, April 27th. So it'll be, for those of you listening to this on the Journey series, I'll also put this audio there. There's things that are going to go with this that I'll tell you, these, this Pete Hegseth and these other people. But you see that there has been an understanding of the power of the sexual drive, the sexual urges, and also the pleasure behind sexuality. And we see, with, of course, the porn industry that makes up 1/3 of the internet, but all the way sex is used and marketed and used on various levels to manipulate people, because people will do stupid shit because they've been hardwired, just like animals are, to take risky behaviors and only think of reproduction, right? And so these are physical things that are hardwired into your body, urge for food, and, like when you're really hungry and you're really thirsty, and, the survival mechanism, and these things that are hardwired into the physical body. And then just all the stimulation that's there, the pleasurable sights and sounds, and, all these things that your soul gets hooked into and loses its sense of itself, its true nature, because the physical life is overwhelming with abundance and stimulation. And now, of course, with the internet, there's a whole nother level of, in the real world versus the cyber world, which cyber world is so entrancing. And, there's just now another layer of this where you're pulled away from your true purpose and your true nature, right? And this is the part that's going to be new. So, about 2 years ago, I just tried, because I've been meditating now for years. And thoughtlessness is not a part of a goal of the Sajmarg meditation. But you learn to become, thoughtless. You can just not think about anything. And, I've had experiences of that I haven't, they weren't things that I did purposely. I just went into a thoughtlessness state. There's a state of samadhi. There's various states where you just withdraw from the world and your mind is blank and you're just feeling, on a different level of consciousness. And so, I just purposely tried, which I hadn't done before, to just not have any thoughts. There's a point, one of the hard points you can meditate to create a thoughtless state, but I wasn't doing that, where I just was like, I'm just not going to think about anything, which I was able to do quite easily because I've been meditating on this system, again, which isn't about that sort of thing. It's not about being thoughtless, but it's a condition or it's an ability you get after a while, and I just had it. And it was just nice not to think about anything. And I could sit there for minutes, a thought would pop in here or there, but, it just like something passing in front of me, like I wasn't even aware of it, like I wasn't paying attention to it. I wasn't thinking of, like you have a thought and then you think more things about that, right? You let your mind, go in that direction. And I was just able to sit there, and then I didn't think about it. Then, and I was, I don't know, there was a series of things that happened. Somebody posted a comment about how that you want to be in a thoughtless state at the time of death. It was one of the teachings from these people who are hearing about Sajmark from me are reading the books and then posting quotes and, being aware of these things themselves, right? And so there was that. And so I, started to work on this thoughtlessness state, and it was a different state of consciousness. And it was what I was doing when I meditated this morning. I've been working on this for over a couple weeks now in my meditations and things, and my meditations got so much better. And what I've realized about it is it's not really about being thoughtless. It's penetrating to a different level of consciousness where you become unaware of your body, which is one of the sort of goals of the Sajmark system during meditation, that you forget about your body. And when you forget about your body, you forget about all the things to do with your body. All your bodily needs, your body's discomfort, any of these things, like any of the sensory kind of things that are there to let you know something's hot, something's cold, there's something crawling on you. There's a fire. You can smell smoke. These things, like all the things like they have to do with your body. Like you're asleep, but you're not asleep. Like you're not thinking about your body at all. You're now just in the state of your soul. So you're in this etheric world, which is, again, not so much of a goal as Sajmark, but something that's a necessary experience and something where you're penetrating to a different level, and that there can be a pure exchange of information without words. It's more of a feeling type of thing, and just like knowing things without them being like tangible, like them being physical reality thoughts, concrete thoughts with words, concrete thoughts with ideas, but just, sensing things and understanding them in seed form. And then they can, you can translate them into words, or you can translate them into the manifestation of a plan and an action or something, right? Where you get things in, an idea, less than an idea, then they turn into, some sort of, where you're thinking about them, like on a level of your mind is, okay, these words that I'm saying to you now, right? It comes in a seed form, in a subtle form, and then it can be, translated into something where you can talk about it, but it's coming from a, more of a telepathy type situation, right? Souls communicate with each other through telepathy. There's no language, and they just know things, and they, there's information exchanged on a different kind of level, and being able to penetrate to that level, going inward and going to a more subtle level of thought and consciousness, right? So here's the thing that, came to me through this process this morning. So I'm coming out of this, right? And I realized, there's just a detachment from my physical body, more of a, as you get older, your physical body, needs to seem more of an illusion in itself, or something that, you're not, you don't just identify with who you are as a physical being. You look in the mirror and you go, yeah, that's me. You look in the mirror, other people look at you, you look a certain way, your voice sounds a certain way, and then you have these tendencies, your preferences, things you like, your favorite, breakfast, or your favorite things, and your, what you like to spend your time on, and the kind of, personality you have based in your physical body, right? Things that have to do with your physical, the physical nature of your, your existence. But as you now, it's like I'm going to be 61 this summer, I turned 60, which is, kind of mind blowing to me because I don't know what even that means, right? But, I'm in the back end of my life, right? I'm the back third of my life. And death is just more prevalent, not just because of any physical issues that I have, but just, it's just, that's how things, go inside your system. Like you're just being prepared. If you're aware, you're not in denial of your circumstance. You're not, in some fear of death way that you're not denying the inevitable end of your life. Then you start to move towards that on a level that you're much more mature. Your life is, your kids are grown, and you have these various things you had to accomplish, and your career is coming to an end, and your physical life is dissipating, and so you now start being prepared for the journey. It's not a real journey, but it's a transition from your physical body to back to being a soul again, right? So you're being prepared for the end of something, like something's ending, like you began as a baby, and now you're going to end. Your life is ending in the near future. Maybe not the near future, but you're much closer to it than you were before. So I had to take a little break and go outside. It's interesting that I'm doing this on such a great time of the year, the spring here, and I'm doing updates on our mushrooms, all these things. Probably in our next video, I have all these videos clips to put together. Like I said, we have tadpoles now, and there's all these things. And so I just let the chickens out. I had them in this peck and play, and now I just let them out where they're getting their first chance to free range outside. And it was a whole process I went through this morning. And spring is such a time for the proliferation of life. The birds are chirping, the frogs are croaking, and the animals are making noise. The trees are flowering out. This is all creation. This is all procreation. Like, this is the proliferation of the species. The seeds are dropping, and love is in the air, all that stuff, right? Spring is the time of creation. I was outside. It was cold out. It's been warm. It'd been the 70s the last so many days, and it was freezing this morning. It rained. That's probably the barometric pressure probably dropped, which often can give me a chance of a headache. But I looked at the weather, and it said it's 48 outside, but it feels like 37. There's a cold wind. But then it started to warm up. The sun came out, and I'm letting the chickens out. So it's just a beautiful spring day. But what I was going to say here is that, this idea that the stuff that I've been, meditating on, and, whatever this particular phase of my spiritual journey, there's this being aware of, like, my body, like almost being an illusion at times, like feeling disconnected from my body. And, in the psychological world, in the counseling world, the DSM-5, this can be considered disassociation or dysphoria, these number of diagnoses, because the problem with mainstream psychology is it's based in the physical mind, it's based in the physical reality. That's a problem with science, because science can't prove a soul. Science can't prove a God. Divine energy can't prove any sort of etheric life. There's no instrument in science to measure such things. And so when science goes strictly into the physical reality, the physical aspect of material existence, which is illusionary at its base, it's an illusion of what's, the real thing, which is etheric. Just like I talk about how you're looking at this video, and it appears to be images, and you're hearing what sounds like my voice, but it's a copy. It's a digital copy, right? I'm talking now. It's Saturday, April 26, 11:56 in the morning, and not to be cryptic, but I could be dead by the time you're listening to this, right? And so it sounds like you're listening to me talk to you, in real time, but I've recorded this 2 days before you're going to listen to it. This is going out on Monday. So whenever you happen to listen to this, it's, days have passed. But it sounds like it's a living, live, whatever it is, right? So these ideas of things going into the digital format, these code, the computer code, the computer languages, those are what's really what you're looking at. And it's manifesting into images and sounds and things, right? And so that's a metaphor for the soul, and science can't even understand that. Most scientists, are atheistic in this regard because they can't, their science, they can't prove the subtle nature and the subtle bodies and the etheric nature of things. So the psychological world, when somebody disconnects from their body and these things, and it often can be a psychological condition. I'm not saying it's 100% spiritual because it's not. Oftentimes crazy people can channel. They can, at times, they'll rise up to a higher level of consciousness. Crazy people are often, madness. One of the first courses when I got my master's degree in counseling, which I really found to be, a great class, was creativity and madness, and it talked about how so many creative geniuses are often considered crazy, artists and musicians and all these people, and we were tasked to find somebody, and I didn't know what to do, and it was a time where I was going through the introduction to a difficult marriage, and 2 kids being born in the first 2 years of the marriage, and then going to graduate school, and I was just overwhelmed, and I didn't know what to do, and I had a friend who did the meditation, a scientist who was a chess player, and said, "You got to do Bobby Fischer." And so I didn't end up doing my presentation last, and it was a good presentation for something that I really didn't want to do. But all the presentations showed that these people who are considered creative geniuses are often crazy, right? And even Babaji himself, the second master of Sage Mark System, said he was mad for divinity. Like he went quite mad for it. So there's a fine line between madness and genius, right? And there's a great TED talk by this woman, Elizabeth something or other. She was the person who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. She also wrote a good book about this guy. There's a guy who's got this, Facebook page called Turtle Reserve, and he was on that show Mountain Man. I can't forget what his name is. Doesn't matter. You could look it up. But I read that book and it was well written. She was a good writer. But she talked about how all these people channel, right? All these people who have creative geniuses. A genius was this disembodied soul. That's what a genius used to be called, right? When they had this idea of a genie. But a genius was some disembodied muse that would channel and help you with your creative process, right? She talked about this one woman who used to, like, the poems. She was a poet, and the poems used to, like, go by her. Like she would have this sensation of, like, this idea of the poem. The words of the poem would, like, fly by her. And one time she didn't catch it, and she had to run and grab it. And then when she wrote the poem, it was backwards. I mean, it's quite interesting to listen to. I mean, you could, some of it might be bullshit, but whatever, like everything could be. But this idea of channeling and this idea of connecting to the etheric world and, the madness that goes with that, because you start to see the material world as an illusion, which creates lots of problems. But you think about people like Kanye West, and, one of the musical artists, I have like 3 or 4 songs of hers, is Selena Gomez. And I don't know her from movies and TV shows, but my kids played some of her songs, and my wife and I, there's, I think, 3 songs of hers we listen to when we go traveling. I have this playlist, and it came out that she was bipolar, because I don't like pop music, right? And so all these artists that are produce really good quality content oftentimes are teetering on being crazy. And so in the mainstream psychological way of looking at things, if you were seeing your body as you're disassociating from it, there's a sense that your mind is breaking down or something like this, right? But it's also, and that could be true. Like there's our people who have personality disorders, and they have, identity disorder, these kind of things, where there's a break from reality. But also can be a spiritual component. There's that great scene from the movie The Grand Canyon, where this older woman is considering, somebody leaves like a baby on her doorstep, and she doesn't know whether to keep the baby. And she's out jogging, and this crazy, gross-looking homeless guy walks by her, and he's talking to himself, violently, like, fuck you, guys, this kind of stuff. And then he goes, "Keep the baby." And he just says it, and she turns around and looks at him, because it's just some, random arbitrary thing. But, she's, she's stressing about whether she should keep the baby because she's older. She wants to keep it, but, it's a big thing to take on, this kind of thing. And so channeling and connecting to the etheric world is something that's reality based. It's more reality based because your soul's eternal and it's the real thing. And so, this material world is illusionary on every, level. Like the sky isn't blue. The color is whatever it is, the green leaf rejecting green and reflecting it back out, absorbing all the other colors of the prism, the spectrum, the prismatic spectrum, and then reflecting green back out, right? Charji, the third master Sajmark system, said in meditation, early on, he had this experience where his ankles were where his head and shoulders were. It was like he was standing on his shoulders, and he was seeing the world from that perspective, like he was above his body. And then he said, towards the end, he was dying, and he'd wake up, and he said, it takes me a few minutes. Like he looked in the mirror, and he didn't know who he was. Like he was he was going into this deep state, when he was this, meditative state, because he was towards the end of his life. He had a couple different kinds of cancers, and his body was breaking down completely. He was having all these experiences of being, not who he was, like not in his body, like he was like looking at a stranger. And people have experienced this, where you look in the mirror and you're like, who the fuck is that, right? It's like this moment where it's just, the person that you know to be yourself, and then all of a sudden in a moment you're like, I don't know who you are. Like there's like you're almost looking at a stranger, right? This other thing is I took this New Age class with some channeling lady, and she, she had some character issues, and she was, she had her own mental issues, but she was, good at channeling. She had some real stuff. A number of people ended up doing the Sajmark meditation in the area that I lived in. They had also gone through her classes. And one of her, she had 10 classes. My ex-girlfriend had found this thing through her therapist or counselor, who I ended up going to, and she learned to channel through this woman. So there was this thing, right? And I'm always doubtful and pessimistic, but also hopeful, and, I'll give things this might be true. Like I'm not, I don't buy into things easily, but I don't reject them easy either. There could be some truth to things. And so I took the class, and it was very interesting. And there was one of the sessions was, whoever was in the class, and there was about 15, 20 people. And you matched up in pairs, and you switched, over time. And you would stare at each other in and it's something that usually would make me very uncomfortable. But when you're looking at that magic eye, one of those holograms, and there's a hidden picture in it, and you let your eyes relax, and then you can see the picture. You're supposed to do something like that, and you're looking at the person, and their face changes. And if you've had a past life with a person, you're supposed to see them, who they were to you in a past life. Or if you've had multiple past lives, you might see, a few different people. And the people that I connected most with in the class, and my ex-girlfriend, it was successful. The other people, there was nothing, right? And so that's why I thought it was definitely, there was something to it, because it only worked with the people that, that I felt some connection to. Like even if I didn't talk to them, there were some people that were more like NPCs, and other people who I felt like there was some sort of maybe, something there. And so it was very interesting to see that, in just like a way that you would, it definitely, there was something, but it's very subtle. It wasn't like something that was concrete or any of these other things. But in all that, you have to balance out knowledge of spirituality with your material duties in your life. You're supposed to live your life, and that's one of the unique things about Sajmark, where you're supposed to have a job and a family. There's no job where you're a spiritual guru. That's not a paid position. There's no monetary exchange in the Sajmark system. All the masters of the system had jobs and families and kids and things. You can't run away from life like, so many other spiritual and religious traditions have their hierarchy do, right? For a variety of reasons that involve, land ownership and politics and all kinds of things. Taking a vow of celibacy, and you have to live a life. You have a body, and you have to acknowledge your body, but you also have a soul, and you have to acknowledge a soul, and which most people just never do. And so, it's a balance of things. But, at the end of it, you were supposed to understand that the body's illusionary, and there has to be some sort of, moving away from it, right? When I first started making videos, I was on a different sort of a level. I was going through a divorce, and the Sajmark system was going through a transition to, this new master Dodgy. And this is when my, videos started to pop and this channel started to take off. And, I used to cover more mundane things in Hollywood. And, I had to, and I felt it was beneath me, it was something like I didn't care about and whatever. But I knew that I had to do it. God let me know, that this was something I had to do to connect with people and to grow the channel and do this as a job. And like with jobs, there are things you don't like, and you just, you do your best to end up liking them. Like, all right, I have to do this, and this is what I'm talking about, being grateful. And you can't really fake it, so you have to get into things. Like I have to get into things I don't care about, politics, celebrity culture, news, and I care less and less about it as, I enter into this sort of phase. And when I first started making videos, I was on a much more grosser material level, going through my own crises and stressors, and I was learning about things too that I didn't know, and truther theories, which I found interesting. So, my videos appealed to many more people. And of course, YouTube was different then and all those types of things. But now, as I've gone farther along in my spiritual, journey, and then all the other things have gone with it, it gets harder and harder for me to jump back into things that are less and less important. The Hollywood culture was a lot more important before the apocalypse started to really unfold like it's doing now. And so, when somebody has a spiritual life and they start talking to people, when they're just in the initial stages of their spiritual awakening, they have a bigger audience. They have a bigger set of disciples. They have a bigger, and that's not what I'm claiming to do here, because I'm not. I'm not that. But just in general, in terms of what I do here in terms of producing content. But the higher you go, the more the stranger you sound to people, because, people can look up a rung on the ladder. That's why, Jesus and some of these other, people who, had spiritual revelations, but they weren't significant enough that they were so far beyond people that they couldn't get them, right? And so, in the more remedial teachings, the lesser than teachings of Jesus are the ones, and the ones that have been manufactured by the Christian tradition are the ones that appeal to the masses. The ones about strength and power, the ones about, how to make your life better, and promises of this and that, and fear and, brimstone and shit in the Old Testament. Those are the things that people are able to gravitate to because their consciousness level just isn't moving in a direction where they can understand his higher level teachings. And I'll say it over and over again, that divinity's within you, and that's just such a remedial statement. But for Americans, it's new for us. There's people that grow up with that concept all around the world. Maybe they don't do anything with it, but at least they understand it and are aware of it and believe in it, right? But, with Americans, that's just not the case. And so if I have to say it over and over again, especially in this materialistic world, things have to be repeated, especially when they're so foreign to people, I'm willing to do that, like just to, provide a service for people. But, on a higher level, this is all just some big fucking illusion. And as you, move forward with your life and you move forward with the spiritual journey, it just becomes apparent that it's so. And, that's what I was alluding to here. This idea that, this body consciousness and everything's about your body and your identity and what people see when they look at you. You look a certain way. People think I'm mad, and, people are sometimes intimidated. I'm off-putting. And some of that's because it's true. I'm not wanting to connect with people. But, I've been never happier. Like, I just don't smile. Like, I don't smile like other people do. Like, a lot of times I'm feeling happy as, really happy. That feeling of happiness. It's a feeling. Like, it's a, this is especially the day after a migraine where but I'm producing more serotonin in the last 3 or 4 years. And I'm generally happy every day. I enjoy what I'm doing here. I enjoy the farm work. I enjoy my time with my wife, all these things. Like, everything is, it's a happier time in my life. And yet, if you looked at me, you would never notice. You wouldn't see it, right? Like, I have to express it verbally or something for people to even see. And even that is hard for them to believe because it's just not how I look, right? And so, people see you as a certain way, through their own prejudice, their own lenses, their own, issues with their, men in their life if you're a man, or women in their life if you're a woman. Like, everyone has their lens. But then you just project things and people see it on a physical level, right? The book, they're judging a book by its cover type of thing. And then they reflect that stuff back to you, and you start believing yourself to be that person that they see, especially when you're in relationships with people, with your significant others that see you a certain way, and they pull things out of you, like they pull things out that they need from you as a husband or as a wife or as a mother or as a father or a brother and sister, as an employee or a boss. Like, people will project things on you and then try to pull those things out of you for their own personal needs, right? And all that shit is even if those things exist to you inside of you, or you play those roles for people, it's all just, I mean, in terms of, we talk about being scripted, and life is it's hard for me to differentiate between what the controllers are scripting and what's just, the divine drama, which is also scripted, because it all seems like it's just contrived, and it's not, it's like there's some kind of thing here, that it isn't happening, organically or in some way randomly. Like there's this plan, and there's this unfolding of some divine drama, or the man-made manipulated drama by the so-called controllers, the people, what people call the elite, and then the manipulated movies and TV shows, but then the flow of energy and information that happens from a divine level of creative consciousness that is manifesting and unfolding in front of us. And so let me just end there, because I got to go do shit, and then I'll come back and finish this video. So I became a Kawhi Leonard basketball player, Kawhi Leonard fan yesterday. Kawhi seems to be an introverted person who, doesn't really have much of a personality in terms of the persona of his, in his interviews or press conferences, and, someone who's a very private person. So I didn't really know what to think about him. I mean, I'm an introvert as well, so, there's always that. But introverts don't necessarily understand other introverts. But he did something great here after the game on, I think, Thursday.
Kids don't need to be drinking.
He takes the Gatorade and he says, kids don't need to be drinking this.
Kids don't need to be drinking.
What? You want those on the table?
Huh?
You want yours on the table?
Nah.
So I assume he is somebody who has learned, a lot of these basketball players understand diet now for longevity, not just basketball players, but athletes. And a lot of people are waking up to bad foods. Now, he might be endorsing some other sports drink, and I hope that isn't the case. I hope this is about him understanding that Gatorade is horrible and that he's not, pitching some other sports drink, so he's taking that out because he's endorsing something else. That would be not so good. And I should have checked that before saying that, I'm a fan. But hopefully this is him saying, this is bad for kids, which it is. Like, Gatorade's full of shit, right? It's horrible stuff. I mean, all these things are. It's not real food. When you can get electrolytes from all kinds of natural, healthy types of drinks, right? They can make a healthy drink that's full of proper electrolytes, that's not full of food color and all the things Gatorade is, right? And that tastes good because you can put potassium in it, which is sweet. I drink electrolyte powder every morning that has a nice orange flavor to it. And so, it's filled with various types of minerals and things, the natural things your body is using up, especially in the summer heat. And so hopefully he's doing this for the right reasons. Like I said, I didn't think this through. But, I'm a fan either way because the Gatorade sucks. So let me just look into the other possibility here. So I looked it up to see if Kawhi Leonard has a sports drink. And Kawhi Leonard hates Gatorade so much, Kawhi Leonard takes Gatorade off the table. He's being applauded in these various articles. And so, and Kawhi Leonard took down Gatorade from his press conference podium yesterday, saying kids don't need to be drinking that. Somebody said here, they laughing, but he dead serious. Gatorade is not healthy. I still drink it, in parentheses. This person wrote, Gatorade, they laughing, but he dead serious. Gatorade is not healthy, but I still drink it. Yeah, that's not good, right? Why would you, if you know it's not healthy? And so Kawhi Leonard impresses fans and removes Gatorade. Times of India. And so hopefully this is done because he knows it's full of shit. I think that's probably the case, but either way, let's move on to the other stuff here. So then he's asked this.
Kawhi, curious to know what your best healthy alternatives to Gatorade are.
I'm not saying mentioning that right now. You could talk to me after.
All right, we'll talk after.
Okay, so he apparently doesn't not endorsed by this he's not endorsing some other sports drink because he would have said it there. So I think he did it for the right reason, and it's like a little crumb of something, like it's a little bit of something. Okay, so a few more things to get to. I want to get to Stephen A. Smith basically coming out and saying he's owned by Disney. Like he says it in not so many words, but like how much he's controlled by Disney. It's about this the thing with Shannon Sharp, and so we'll get to that. And then I want to get to Pete Hegseth. Just the guy is a fucking disaster, right? But first, this thing here.
The European Union decided to put a pause on plans to retaliate against U.S. tariffs. That decision comes just hours after President Trump announced a hold on most of his new global tariffs. But the reprieve does not apply to America's neighbors. We're talking about Canada and Mexico. The new 25% tariff on most goods remains in effect. Joining us now is Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario and one of Canada's most outspoken critics of President Trump's trade war. Premier, thanks so much for joining us. Were you surprised that the White House didn't pause tariffs on Canada, perhaps our closest friend and ally, as it did with several other countries, several of whom are not necessarily close friends or allies?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Wolf. And yeah, we were shocked that we weren't part of the group per se. And number one customer. We're both each other's number one customer, and we need to get through this and bring certainty back to the people of the United States and Canada, certainty to the markets, as you mentioned. The Dow is down, the S&P is down.
All right, so what needs to be said about Trump doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, and you can believe in Trump and make shit up because he told you shit that wasn't true and you believed it, even though he's a proven liar or grifter, and he's a fucking he's gone bankrupt 6 fucking times. Like, do you think he didn't? That after once or twice, 6 times, right? Declaring bankruptcy, not paying his bills, like fucking making poor financial decisions. And a number of decisions he's made has been poor decisions. Like, he makes bad decisions. He fails quite often. And then, all these things. So, he's been let loose. He's going full Trump. He doesn't really know how tariffs work. And now he's trying to save face. I think now he realizes he's full of shit, but I think he doesn't, not realize he's full of shit. He realizes he's, he'll never, people like this, everyone has ways of rearranging things so it's not their fault, right? People who have this, negative beliefs. They believe they're evil. They believe they're, there's narcissistic wounding, as they call it, and they can't ever be wrong. They can't ever make mistakes. They're fragile, right? And, we all have this to some extent. And so, whatever reason he's trying to reconcile to the failure here, he knows it's not going to work. And now he's trying to get out of it with some sense of dignity. Like, he knows that the negotiations aren't going his way. He knows that the markets have turned on him. He knows the people are turning on him. So right now he's just like everybody's out to get him. And even the people who were his allies and people like this, Republicans are going to get ready to start, everyone's going to start bailing on him. He's going to be left on a fucking island with his little tariffs and Pete Hegseth, right? He's rolled out his agenda, which he thought would be successful, and it's not. And there's no path to victory here. And so he's trying to figure a way out like he's done before. He bails and, whatever, throws people under the bus. Whatever he's going to do to survive, because he's been here before. Like, he's been in the shitstorm before of his own making, so that's where he is now. Here it is here.
When the scope of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes finally came to light, Virginia Giuffre was the woman at the center of the story.
Giuffre?
publicly sharing painful details of her own experience. In a statement to NBC News tonight, her family announcing the 41-year-old mother of 3 took her own life, writing she lost her life to suicide after being a lifelong victim of sexual abuse. Giuffre said she was recruited by Epstein's girlfriend Ghislaine Maxwell when she was just 14 years old.
So she got Epsteined. Remember, she was the guy for Prince Andrew.
According to Giuffre, it was the start of years of sexual abuse by Epstein, Maxwell, and their friends.
It was that constant, we own the police. You can't run. You can't tell anybody. We'll never be held accountable for this.
At age 17, Giuffre said Maxwell and Epstein directed her to have sex multiple times with Prince Andrew.
She's the one who got $12 million from Prince Andrew, the settlement, and now she's dead.
Allegation the prince denied. Giuffre sued, and she settled with the prince in 2022, receiving an undisclosed amount of money.
$12 million. He said he didn't do it, but he decided to pay her off anyway.
Epstein and Maxwell were both charged with sex trafficking. Epstein took his own life in federal prison before
Yeah, he got Epsteined.
standing trial. Maxwell was convicted and given a 20-year sentence.
And Trump still hasn't come correct on this because Trump is, pals with Epstein.
In one of her last social media posts earlier this month, Giuffre said she was hospitalized after a car accident and was gravely injured, posting a disturbing photo. But days later, she was released. Tonight, the family says they are heartbroken, writing Giuffre was heroic and will always be remembered for her incredible courage and loving spirit.
Giuffre. Okay, so Giuffre is, suicided. I mean, whatever truth is in any of these stories, whatever's happened here, first she's in this car accident, which we all remember, and then, like a Princess Diana car accident, perhaps. And then next thing you know, she's dead.
Stephanie Gosk, NBC News.
Okay, so there's that. This also falls under the category of mainstream media gets to gloat. Because they, this is what they warned against, and Trump's doing exactly what they said he was going to do. Not because they're prophetic, not because any of these things, because it's part of a plan they're not in on. But, MSNBC, Trump says CNN is fake news. But MSNBC is the worst in terms of hating on Trump. And now, this headline, well, let's just get into it here. I'm sure they'll talk about it.
This is, therefore, the final Friday until President Trump hits that big 100-day marker. He's ending another very rough week, and a lot of the ingredients that made it so rough, chaotic, and even hellish for the Trump administration were largely of Trump's own making.
President Trump marks 100 days in office next week, but new polling shows voters see little to celebrate.
Americans are not buying what Donald Trump is selling them.
The polls, they're not extraordinary.
He is underwater when it comes to the economy, tariffs, and inflation.
It's been one of the worst April.
So when Fox starts saying that shit, right here.
They're not.
Look at her fake smile. Look at her she's trying to be an old lady mannequin, right?
Extraordinary.
He is underwater when it comes to the economy, tariffs, and inflation.
So those three things, right, are big. Those are its big failures.
One of the worst Aprils since the Great Depression and the most volatile April since the global financial crisis.
We saw the markets tanking and blinked.
There were a rough couple of days there in the courtroom for the Trump administration.
Well, once again today, Donald Trump backed down.
We saw this guy. Remember how fucking happy this two-faced looking motherfucker is? The hammer guy.
Once again today, the man who always pretends he never backs down.
We saw this part. So let's get back to Ari Miebler.
In that brief summary I just showed you how this week is playing, we included coverage and reaction from folks across different networks. This is not one of those things that splits into America's sometimes divided perspectives.
No, because Fox is finally agreeing with you. Don't lie, Ari Miebler. You put Fox in there because it's much worse when Fox is saying it. Like when you guys say it, you're supposed to say it. When Fox says it, it's bad.
What do you consume and what do you think and what do you watch? Are you going with your prior convictions, as they say? Nope, this is another week that actually, in reality, exposes the gap between Trump's talk, which, of course, is part of his thing. He knows how to talk. He knows how to command a room. That's what made him a working reality TV host. And at times, it made him effective.
Remember?
the campaigning part of
She hates him now.
politics, right? But unlike
Omarosa.
reality shows, this week's actual reality proves the gap between talk and action. The stock market continues to slide and move around, but ultimately be down about 9%, multiple trillions of dollars.
Okay, we know all that. Let's move forward. There's something about Elon Musk here.
Provided enough criminal evidence to get himself indicted in 4 different cases, something that had never happened to any.
Okay, that's some bullshit stuff here.
That may offer him a break from some of the chaos that he's been reckoning with.
Use my word, chaos.
If he's traveling over there for the funeral, he won't
I got there first, Ari.
be available to do another in-person meeting soon, with CEOs warning about
Okay, so let's get to this is about Elon Musk. This is the headline I wanted.
And for Trump, that's
Okay, we'll go back here.
stopped from installing a loyalist inside the Treasury Department. A kind of bureaucratic sign that on one hand is small, I would even argue boring, right? It's just one little thing and one little
Let's go
agency.
back.
And
Where does it start off here with here?
asking Musk say that Elon Musk's duties will continue to shrink. And this comes after Trump already narrowed Musk's role after that
After bluster, Musk sees both his stocks and influencing slumping.
cabinet clash meeting. You might recall that was one of the many big stories of the first 100
Remember when his kid was wiping his boogers all over Elon?
days. This week, Musk tried and failed. He was stopped from installing a loyalist inside the Treasury Department. A kind of bureaucratic sign that on one hand is small, I would even argue boring, right? It's just one little thing and one little agency, and yet it also says something that's important based on the boring evidence. And I will tell it to you simply. Those Musk tactics, which did partially work, say, in February, storming into the agencies, fire first, scare people, send them nasty emails, see who'll quit, litigating after. Some of those tactics worked in the short run in the sense that they got part of where he wanted to go because he got rid of some people or he caused the fights he wanted and went forward on his efforts to cut staff and money out of parts of the federal government. So they were kind of working. Well, now they're not working, which is why that boring agency story detail matters, because Elon Musk, with all of his money and power, storming into the cabinet meetings, his relationship with the president, he says, I want this one fellow at IRS, and they go.
Okay, so, I mean, the crash, Musk has lost over $1 billion a day in Trump's first 100 days. So they're saying Elon Musk has lost $100 billion. And his stocks have gone down by 70%, so his profits at Tesla. So that's, part of this thing, right?
Well, most billionaires that we report on and mention, they don't have $10 billion, let alone 50, right? Let me tell you this fact as we end the rough week, approaching 100 days. Elon Musk has now lost a staggering $122 billion because Musk's wealth is tied up in Tesla, which has been hammered for a bunch of reasons, along with the other companies that are crashing, and its net income plunged more than half, plunged 70%. There's also
so, when this happened, when Trump got elected, I thought it was a good bet to bet on Tesla. Like, I mean, I'm not in this, I don't buy stocks, but I would have thought Tesla's going to go up, right? Because Elon Musk has power. Of course, we know that True Social has value now and still is keep holding its value. They're going to go public, and it's going to be worth it's going to have a $2 billion valuation, and it's owned almost exclusively by Trump. So Trump is going to make $2 billion on that True Social. Something I said, he should have done. If you guys remember my videos when 2020, when Trump was getting, he was getting deplatformed, which nobody could see coming. But I had said before that, he should have started his own social media in case something like that happened, because they did shut him out. Remember, he couldn't go on social media, so his side of the story, he got completely Alex Jonesed, and nobody was getting his side of the story. And he had the wherewithal. I mean, he had the ability to go and do that, right? But he did it afterwards, True Social, and then it sucked, and it was all Trump people. But he could have had that ahead of time. But once he loved Twitter, and when they banned him from Twitter post-election, he had no voice, right? They just stole his voice. But anyways, he did go through and do this thing that, he should have done before the election, 2020. So he had a, platform to put his opinion in case the mainstream media censored him and the social media censored him like before. But, most of the things that I thought were going to go up, like, cryptocurrency went up for a short period of time, and Musk's Tesla went up, initially. But now he's been hammered in every possible way. A lot of liberals environmentalists were driving Teslas, and now they're, it's a badge of shame, right? It's a scarlet A. We're driving a Tesla now for these liberals, and so, he's getting hammered business-wise, and he's failing at Doge because it was inevitably going to fail. And this is what happens when you ally yourself with Trump. And plus whatever he spent, he spent hundreds of millions of dollars on Trump's campaign on top of it, Elon Musk. So he spent a fortune on Trump's campaign. He did all this work. And eventually Trump's going to dump him and blame him because that's what Trump does. He throws people under the bus. I mean, Elon's a little bit richer, so maybe Trump will have to deal with it that way. But I mean, he's, everything Trump touches turns to shit, right? Everybody that he's ever, been in business with, like Steve Bannon went to jail, and Cohen went to jail, his fixer lawyer, Michael Cohen went to jail, and these other people, I mean, Chris Christie, all these people, Rudy Giuliani. How's Rudy Giuliani's hawking supplements on a fucking podcast, and he got a $100 million lawsuit that went against him. Like, I mean, his face melted, Rudy Giuliani. I mean, these other people, those lawyers, all of his lawyers that fought the election fight, some of them in jail, some of them disbarred. These various, that woman who said she was going to release the Kraken, remember? And then Trump fired her because she was saying so much crazy shit. Like, all these people that end up aligning themselves with Trump. And, Trump didn't pay, Rudy Giuliani was desperate for money, and Trump didn't pay him for his legal services. So he fucked, Rudy Giuliani's reputation beyond repair. Rudy Giuliani then became a target because of his going, being Trump's lawyer for the whole election, debacle. And then Trump didn't even pay his fucking bill. I mean, this is a fucking kind of, Trump's a cancer to all these people. Like, he just sucks things dry and disposes of them. And everybody who's done business with him, it's like they turn to stone, like he's some kind of fucking demon.
Evidence, Musk never thought it would get this bad for him or cost him this much. He's leaving not only with his reputation wounded, Axios now reports at the end of this tough week, but relationships severed, company in crisis, fortune diminished. Now, as the richest person, Musk has lost more money than most. And
he has a weird thing with his kids. Like, he's got like 15, 20 kids people don't even know about. He likes to do it with he likes to have kids with famous women. One of the women came forward and said that he's got this belief that God's ordered him to save the population, like he's some kind of cult leader, and have as many kids as possible. All that with his weird tendencies, and naming his kids X and shit like that because the apocalypse is coming. So I mean, he's got some fucked up cult like Mormon, Joseph Smith and some of these other, like, having this polygamy thing going on.
We can also ask, again, as a society, in terms of tax policy and how we might...
All right, so that's it. Musk is fucked, right? Like, you align yourself with Trump, you get fucked. I just remembered one of these, it was maybe Rachel Maddow, one of these Trump haters, did this thing about all the people that, work for Trump, align with Trump, or Trumpers, are now in jail, fired. I mean, just, like, there's a long list of people I had no idea. I didn't even know their names. Like, these are all people who, now are engaged in all kinds. And some of it was, people going after them because they were Trumpers. So, yeah, there was that. But this is not just that, right? And then all, the people I listed and things. Like, it's just, Trump has just a history of being like the reverse of King Midas with the golden touch. Everything he touches turns to shit, right? Like, so. Then little Petey Hegseth.
Boy, it just seems every day, sometimes more than once a day, there's a new jaw-dropping story about Pete Hegseth's incompetence and recklessness at the Department of Defense. So yesterday we learned that Hegseth had an unsecured internet line installed in his Pentagon office so he could continue to use the commercial messaging app Signal.
Yeah, we remember that. Remember that? That was awesome.
Leaving him vulnerable to potential hackers who might be interested in what the head of the DoD is up to. Of course, we also know that Hegseth has used his personal cell phone, which I got to stress in the government is like a real no-no, to discuss sensitive information about imminent military strikes. Again,
a la Hillary Clinton.
Using Signal in multiple chains. Today, New York Times reports, quote, Hegseth's personal phone number was easily accessible on the internet and public apps as recently as March, potentially exposing national security secrets to foreign adversaries.
Holy shit. So they somehow got his personal cell phone numbers all over the fucking internet. You know, like this guy is just fucking, I mean, he's so moronic. Like, Trump has fucked up a lot in 100 days, and Trump's the president, so his fuck-ups have more gravity, especially certainly the tariffs. But this guy, I mean, he is just a fucking mess, right?
Cooper covers national security at the New York Times, where she was one of the reporters who broke this story, and she joins me now. Great reporting, Helene, you and your colleagues. First, I want to start with just the idea of the personal phone for every member of the government, not the least the head of the DoD. You're told, like, do not do anything official, certainly nothing classified in your personal phone, right?
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me. It's true. I mean, even
true.
Level government officials. I have a friend who works for NOAA, and she does not do any government business on her personal cell phone. And so you can imagine we're talking about the Secretary of Defense here, who is probably one of the most targeted person in the people in the world when it comes to what hackers or what foreign adversaries, when I say target, I don't mean target to kill, I mean target to surveil. Who would be one of the people.
You don't sound like a reporter.
Who would be the top 5 or 6 in the United States when you're looking at officials that foreign adversaries would want to get a hold of his communications device. So the issue is not that Pete Hegseth has a personal cell phone. Everybody does these days.
Everyone does. Sure, we all do. Hey, you can have one PP. Hey.
Now?
Sorry, it's fucking stupid. I mean, the guy's just a disaster, and we only know a little bit of it. Like, there's shit going on behind the scenes. It's fucking chaos over there in Trump land, and we're only getting little bits of it, right? I mean, this kind of stuff, it'll come all out in books long after everyone won't give a shit because we'll be, fighting rats for scraps and garbage cans and shit like that. All right, so you know what the best thing to do when you're up against it is fucking shut the fuck up, right? There's this, public service announcement there's that obnoxious guy with a heavy New York accent. You know, the guy who used to hate Trump, but then he turned on Biden. But he's with 2 lawyers, and, they're talking about if you get arrested, you get in trouble with the police, any of these things. And the guy says that his one line is shut the fuck up, right? Like, you just don't talk because, people think they're going to talk their way out of shit, and you're always going to say things. Even if you didn't fucking do it, you're going to incriminate yourself. And Stephen A. Smith said this about Shannon Sharp when Shannon Sharp came out and made this big denial. Because, people are going to believe whatever they want to believe. And so, if you have to feel good about yourself, about whatever you've done or haven't done, any kind of accusations you have. And trying to explain your way out of it is just desperate, right? And even if you're innocent, you can be desperate. But this guy isn't innocent. And he's not smart. And so instead of just minimizing his, he went on that disastrous interview I covered in either my last video or the video before that. And he went on that interview in Fox, and he just did a horrible job. It was embarrassing. And then he's been doing these public service announcements of the things he's doing in the Department of Defense. And he's speaking to the right-wing people who, he was trying to garner their support. And they're not the people that are going to swing it one way or another. The diehard Trumpers, they're not going anywhere. They're just not capable of seeing what's in front of them with Trump and the rest of it, this guy and all of it. And so, like, he's still trying to, win over their support when he already has it. And they're not the people in charge of this. So, like, this is just stupid on every level.
We're back with another DOD reform, and this one, it's a doozy. Now, the official subject of this memorandum.
So this is this guy thinking that this is a performative position. I can't even name the last Secretary of Defense. There's that guy Blinken. I'm not sure if it was him. But, the one before that, right? Other than Don Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney, who were, prominent in their warlike capacity. And Don Rumsfeld was a big one. Dick Cheney, I wasn't aware at the time. I was aware of Don Rumsfeld because of those illegal wars and the legal ramifications of the Iraq and those 5-4 wars, Afghanistan, all that shit, right? But in general, I don't really know who the guy is. And if they don't pop like this. But this guy is someone who is on, Fox News. He's got a public persona. He was, a blogger. He has his brother's a blogger. He's got this, not blogger, but podcaster. And so he thinks it's a good idea to just keep on talking. And he had an audience that'd like to listen to him. So he thinks that other people will, and they won't. Like he has a very specific audience, as all Trumpers do, and it's limited to and not exceeding the Trumpers. It's not going to bring other people in. And so, like, he does this stupid shit where he's going on and just calling more attention to himself, which is problematic because Trump doesn't want that. Trump doesn't want anybody overshadowing him, especially when the guy is underwater, right? Like, this guy should just shut the fuck up and wait till things blow over.
Is review of medical conditions disqualifying for a session into the military, meaning in the previous administration, because they couldn't get enough recruits with all their lunacy, they lowered the standards and gave waivers to people who should never have been in the military in the first place. We're going to read a list in a second. So they lowered the standards and created waivers for people that had no business being in our formations. We're changing that through this guidance.
He's trying to show you what a great job he's doing, because he wants you to take your attention off the fact that he leaked classified information, set up an unsecure line in a secure Pentagon location, which is a fucking no-no, was doing shit on his cell phone. People got access to his cell phone number. I mean, just a fucking mess across the board. Had to fire his buddies who started, like, in his mind, leak, which he didn't have any proof of. Leaks were coming out of his department because he's a fucking moron. Everyone in the department must hate the fucking guy because he doesn't belong there. He's not earned his position. And Trump may or may not bail on him at any moment. And he's out there trying to tell you about what Biden did wrong. Right? This is like this Trump bullshit, right?
Here's a little bit more on it. So applicants for military service, as we believe, must be physically and mentally able to perform their duties under the harshest of conditions without risk to themselves or others, right? Shouldn't be able to risk themselves or others unless it's the enemy. Then you want to hurt the enemy.
Oh, the enemy? We want to hurt the enemy. Okay, thanks, bro.
That's why we need clear, high, and uncompromising medical and mental standards for those who desire to serve.
No way. You do? You need those things? Crazy. You're going to have to lower these standards again as soon as you institute the draft when we go to World War III in the next couple of years. If this guy's running the fucking show, you can bet it's going to fucking blow up in everybody's face. It's going to be bad already, World War III. But, I mean, this incompetent motherfucker.
They should never be lowered, but they were under Biden. Get this one. So this is current DOD policy that we inherited. It still permits medical waivers concerning medical conditions like schizophrenia, congestive heart failure, cystic fibrosis, and chronic use of oxygen. Now, there's one more.
You wait till these people come in that he's going to end up getting, because all these kids are all fucked up, right? They're all depressed and they're all fucked up, have health issues. This is the draft class that's coming in when they have to go to the draft. So anyways, like, he just shouldn't be doing this. It's just stupid. Like, just shut the fuck up, bro. I said the same thing to Alec Baldwin. You're not making it better. The only thing he's got going for him is the only person who can fire him is Trump. But, at some point, Trump may or may not fire him. I mean, may fire him, but like probably not ever. But if he does, it'll happen quickly when Trump just makes an arbitrary decision. Trump firing him makes Trump look bad. But he's making Trump look bad now. And if Trump needs a distraction, like he throws everybody under the bus eventually. So one of the things I don't like about Pete Hegseth, aside from him being a Trumper and all these other things, he's a poser, right? Like he's posing like a tough guy and he's posing like he's into the military, but he's got those weird, he's got a makeup studio now at the Pentagon and he's used to being pampered and primped up at Fox News. He's very like this sort of metrosexual, feminine kind of, all that kind of stuff. But he's, just an absolute poser. Like he says he cares about the military, but he's doing things to damage the military and his credibility. He's hurting morale, I'm sure. And he's, doing things in terms of playing fast and loose with information and making a mockery of what they do. And, I'm not a military person and I don't like all this security and I don't like all the secrecy. I don't like all the bullshit that these people are into who are into this kind of thing. But for the people who are into it, he's not one of them. He doesn't have self-discipline. He's not a disciplined person. One of the things you have to be a military person is discipline. And lots of people learn about discipline and how to discipline themselves by going through, basic training and being in the military and knowing how to follow orders and obey the rules. And he doesn't know any of those things. He is, he's skirted around various rules. I mean, even putting his own private line so we can use the Signal app, which is, all that's bad. And then pretending that doesn't matter and lying about it, that's all being a poser, like pretending to be something and coming out with these sort of, how he's getting the military fixed after Joe Biden. And yet he's doing as much damage or more to it by being just an absolute piece of shit and being a Trumper. Anyways, let's move on. Okay, so this thing with Stephen A. Smith talking about Shannon Sharpe. Like Stephen A. Smith, he's such he's a good self-promoter. He's a lot like Trump. He may be a better person than Trump slightly, but he's kind of more annoying, less likable. But he's great at self-promotion and recognizing, when to capitalize on a situation. Now he's capitalizing on Shannon Sharpe came to work for First Take at his request. He recruited him after Skip Bayless, who himself was accused of sexual abuse of some sort or another. Skip Bayless is the most unlikable of the three. And Skip Bayless he was the one who originally recruited Stephen A. Smith to First Take. And they made it into like the #1 show. Skip Bayless was blown out at ESPN for whatever reason. He started his own thing. Shannon Sharpe went on with him. Shannon Sharpe then developed his own podcast, Club Shay Shay, right? And then now he's accused. He was about to sign a big $100 million deal with some podcasting thing, and now he is accused of raping and sexual assault of 2 women, one of whom wants $50 million. And so this is Stephen A. Smith realizing, okay, people are going to want to hear what I have to say about this. So regardless of whether this is good for Shannon Sharpe or anybody else, Stephen A. Smith is realizing this is a big moment for him, right? And so he commented on the first day. Today he came out and said that he thinks Shannon Sharpe is innocent only to the extent that he knows Shannon Sharpe and he hopes he's innocent, but he can't say it factually. Like that's him, throwing out some, throwing Shannon Sharpe a bone. But, Shannon Sharpe has been suspended from ESPN Disney. And so this is going to lead Stephen A. Smith to say, Disney basically controls him. And so it starts here. And I'm going to segue into a further thoughts of what I was saying earlier today about disassociation from the body, right? And so here it
is the fact that this 3-time Super Bowl champion and this Hall of Famer, who emphatically stated to me over the phone how innocent he is of these allegations that have been levied against him, insisting repeatedly that anything you read, anything you see, anything you hear was fully and totally consensual. In the same breath, what's inescapable is that without us knowing all the merits, he was working with Disney.
So then he's going to get into, he talks about that a little bit. You know, that, you know, how Disney, we'll move forward here a little bit, but he's going to get into how Disney is impeccable in their standards, which I'll get into a little bit at the end of this thing. We know that, you know, well, I'll do a little thing on Disney and then come back to the whole thing about how this ties into, you know, your body isn't your body isn't you, right? Your body is a temporary situation. And so both things are going to be, you know, the two different points here. And so let's go to the Disney part here.
Live in terms of the podcast stratosphere and everything like that. A lot of people want to walk around thinking you can do what you want to do when you want to do it. You could your own operation. You don't have to answer to anybody. That's not true. I've had people
stand up,
open their mouth.
They open their mouth. People will open their mouth, aka their ghoul hole,
and they've said,
look at how dramatic he is, like this whole performative. Like, you know, this is supposed to be his friend who's getting, like, possibly, you know, is either a rapist and he's also getting worked, right? I mean, $50 million, right? This is, you know, exorbitant amount of money that he's being sued for, you know, I mean, maybe 2 million, you know, this is the Trump numbers, right? So that's over the top lawsuit. Again, this isn't a person who's saying, well, let's cut off his balls, right? Or let's castrate him. You know, something like, you know, what would you want to do if this happened to you or happened to one of your loved ones? If Shannon Sharp raped one of your loved ones, is you want $50 million or you want to, like, you know, kill him or, you know, castrate him or something, right? You know, some kind of other, you know, a situation where there's physical punishment, but people want to get paid. And so, you know, whatever it is, like in this situation, whatever's true, whatever's not true, they're going after a lot of money. Like they see an opportunity to get money here, regardless of what he did or didn't do. And Stephen A. Smith's like acting and it being dramatic and like trying to own this moment, right? This is how fucked up everybody is.
Stephen A., you work for ESPN. What kind of control do you really have? This is my podcast.
It's his podcast.
My YouTube show.
This is YouTube show.
This. But if you think for 1 second that I could just do what I want to do, when I want to do it, how I want to do it, and there's not going to be any repercussions, you're clueless. And you're destined to fail and fall on your face. I'm not talking about Shannon Sharp. I'm not talking about Shannon Sharp. I'm not talking about anybody in particular. I'm talking about a climate that we're living in.
Climate he's living in.
Some people sit up there and they look at me and they say, Stephen A. don't get himself in this kind of trouble. How does he pull it off? Well, first of all, there's certain behaviors and proclivities that you never have to worry about me engaging in. But most importantly than that, I also...
He said horrible things that he should have been, I mean, in a just world, he should have been held accountable for. You know, my big issue with him was, aside from his being just obnoxious and loud and, you know, this Trump-like, you know, Trump rewarded people in the boardroom. Like Stephen A. Smith would have been on Celebrity Apprentice, like he just would have. And Trump would have liked him because he can argue and shout and get loud in the boardroom, which Trump liked. You know, and he's like thinking if you out-yell the other person, you're winning the argument. Like it's just silly shit like this, right? Where it's just, you know, lowbrow kind of stuff. But Stephen A. Smith came out and said, you know, going back to he's going to talk about working for Disney, that he didn't want to give up his $8 million a year because he had his own questions about the vax. But threw Kyrie Irving under the bus so much for doing something great, standing up for something he believed and giving up, you know, probably $75 to $100 million in salary for that period of time, risking his career by not playing in these goofy mandated type of things, right? Because ESPN Disney mandated that everyone had to get the vax, including a woman who was trying to get pregnant, and she didn't want to have the vax, and they fired her. And so, he didn't stand up for any of those people, threw Kyrie Irving under the bus, got into it with Kyrie Irving's dad. It got personal. He kind of almost had to apologize, but not in a real way, right? Not in a way that took responsibility for how bad he failed. Given that he was the number one sort of celebrity guy who gives opinions about sports, right?
I often say this about Walt Disney. I'd rather work for a place with standards than one looking for them.
He thinks Walt Disney has standards. Again, mandatory vax. And I'll show you the images of all the times Walt Disney, Walt Disney himself, he had this, and I forget the guy's name, Bobby something or other. Bobby Driscoll, maybe something like that. Walt Disney had a very unhealthy relationship, probably sexual, with this guy, Bobby Driscoll. Walt Disney suffered serious abuse when he was a kid, definitely physical, probably sexual. And then he, wanted to relive his childhood. He was like a Michael Jackson kind of guy. And, he made this fake place that's so seedy, and there's a lot of shit that goes on. And they put, like, not only Freemasonic and devil-worshipping images and themes into their movies. There's most recently they released, Marvel Disney, the Disney Channel released this Daredevil show, and it, the ad said, "The devil's work is never done." So you have a little clip of that. I'll show you that while I'm doing my narration about this, right? But Walt Disney has long been association with, this like pedo stuff, right? And you got a tick on my bed here. Okay, so I dealt with that tick. So here's the Zephyr character. It's from some of the show on Disney Channel. The Zephyr, I forget what the name of the show was. And it has a clear man-boy love symbol as its spots. And this is just one of many things like that. There's multiple things here. There's like penises, phallic symbols, the word sex, and these things that are, you'll see this. I have a compilation here of various images from Disney. So there's inappropriate sexual or suggestive different types of things in Disney's content, right? Inappropriate for children, just subconscious, subliminal, getting caught over and over again. The priest with a heart on, the Little Mermaid when he's marrying these things, right? Cartoons that they have to draw these things on purpose. Then there's a lot of Disney workers and people. There's a sex trafficking ring, people getting busted in that. And Disney is its own police force. Like Disney is, it's got to deal with like Florida and Orlando, area that they, that they're self-contained. And so they can keep things. They want to maintain this idea of the happiest place on earth. And so they do whatever they can to not have these, this imagery and things like that. But then there's also the villains. And now they had a show called The Descendants, which was the grandchildren of evil people. I don't have any images of Maleficent here, but Maleficent was a show where, movie where they took a villain and turned her into a hero. And, Angelina Jolie, a very twisted person. And they made Maleficent too. And there was a scene in there where her and the writer talked about how it was an analogy for rape, right? So there's the devil-worshipping aspect of this. I'll find Maleficent photos too and put those in here somewhere, probably at the end of this. But the Maleficent stuff, she was, a villain that turned into a hero, and she got her wings clipped, and that was supposed to be an analogy for rape. So, like, because you can't put those kind of narratives in front of kids early enough. Like kids 3, 4, 5, 6 years old being scared by this devil-worshipping Baphomet character, right? And that this, anyway, so there's, that stuff. Like you're putting that in front of little kids. And then there's the way they make villains in general. Remember when the Olympics, the British rolled out their villains. And, a lot of times the story is about the villain. The villain's the more interesting character. The villain is really the protagonist. And they started to do that where they started making serial killers. I mean, this isn't just Disney. This is, this became an industry standard with a show like Dexter and these, Silence of the Lambs, where they had serial killers who are now heroes, and bad people who are, Clint Eastwood and Dirty Harry, people who are taking the law into their own hands, people who are considered villains were now heroes, and this became a new genre, across the board in these various types of shows. Disney has some of that in them. Other cartoon networks also have inappropriate things for kids. And people who work there who are pedos and are, that guy for Sesame Street who was the voice of Elmo and things like this, convicted, these various people who have these, deviant tendencies. So, Walt Disney himself with the Bobby Driscoll, that is his name, there's a book about it, their unhealthy relationship, that was, at very least was weird and creepy and probably sexual. And so, Walt Disney was a broken person who had been abused and then really didn't have a childhood of his own, didn't know how to be a kid. And then he created this place. And then, of course it's going to descend into kind of this evil kind of shit, right? Because people with deviant tendencies, if you have, like, there's that documentary called An Open Secret where these kids who wanted to star in Hollywood productions, the agents and the producers and these people ended up being pedos that would put themselves in a position, people like Harvey Epstein, Weinstein, who, they put themselves in a position between something they want, something you want, and something they want to extract from you. So the casting couch. So for Harvey Weinstein, it was these young women, and for some of these other guys, it's kids. But they put themselves in this position where they're gatekeepers, where you have to go through them to become a child celebrity. This guy, Ron Perlman, who was abusing these boy band members. He started NSYNC and these other, these other bands, and he was getting sexual favors from these kids who wanted to be in boy bands and things like this, right? So, this is the kind of creepiness that's, Disney's a big part of it. And Disney's with these villains and evil, that they have these villains that are, horrible, they're horrible villains, these types of, these devil, like the devil plays a role often in Disney's films. They show you the devil in various ways. Of course, Daredevil, the devil's work never sleeps. And so there's, a devil being put in front of your kids. And so the hero wins, and, the hero's the good guy, and, you feel like, oh, wow, the hero defeated the devil or some demon like Maleficent. But, the story also includes all this evil shit, manipulation, poisoning people, murdering them, abusing them, all these things that the bad guys do. And, it's just a very seedy type of situation. And Stephen A. Smith saying that, Disney, you can't get away with anything, right? This whole thing he's going to talk about here coming up. And, well, let's get back into it here. So getting back into it here.
You know why? Because lines are drawn. And I never have to worry about crossing them because guess what? I've got something there reminding me, hold on. You don't need to do that. It's not a silo. I'm not by myself. I don't get to operate in any way that I want without having to worry about ramifications or repercussions. I always have to be concerned about that. So I'm challenged every day to come on the airwaves and think about the ramifications and repercussions of anything that I do.
So this is how much Disney owns him, right? Because there's certain things, he says some horrible things, like about, there's basketball players. There's that guy Kwame Brown, who was a first pick by Michael Jordan, the #1 draft pick. He was an 18-year-old kid out of high school, 7-foot guy. And he ended up sucking in the NBA. And Stephen A. Smith tore him apart. The guy now has his own podcast. And a lot of the podcast is about how much Stephen A. and these other guys are pieces of shit. Because he was an 18-year-old kid, and they demonized the crap out of him because he didn't, make it in the NBA, right? He was a bust. And, he's the stuff with Kyrie Irving and some of these other things. But those are okay. Going after anti-vaxxers, going after young kids, saying things that are inflammatory, these types of things about athletes. But Stephen A. Smith is often on the wrong side. He's on Disney's side, right? Disney propaganda. Disney, the pedo organization, right? The Disney, the despicable, creepy underbelly this mega, which owns ABC and ESPN and all these, and Marvel and all these other big media companies.
Constantly. And because of that, that's an additional guardrail to secure me from putting myself
in the same situation that Shannon Sharpe just put himself into, which I agree with him. Shannon Sharpe was a 50-something-year-old man banging an 18-year-old only fans model thing, whatever, right? That, who was her own money grabbing, whatever. I mean, whatever he did, but it was abusive or not, these things. And I'll get into this more about the spiritual aspects and, this thing about, we'll come back to that.
In a position that could jeopardize myself, my show, my brand, my family, the company that I work for, anything like that. Again, I'm not talking about Shannon.
Yeah, you are. You totally are. You're talking about how you take this more responsibly and you wouldn't have done what he did. He put himself totally in this position. You're right about that. But you're shitting all over the guy, which is totally uncool. Like, he's something that you wouldn't do. Like, this is like if you really, the guy's going through something. And it might be, at least it's partially a shakedown. Whatever he did or didn't do, this is also a shakedown. And, it's being done in a public way and, whatever. I mean, they're not going after him in a criminal way. They're not looking for criminal charges. This is a civil suit. They're not looking for him to go to jail, which is like if you're really hurt by something, it goes beyond money. Yeah, sure, you should be compensated. If there's, whatever that is or whatever that isn't, in terms of compensation, monetary or whatever else. But when you've been traumatized in such a way and something's done that's illegal, you go use the legal system to put him in jail, right? Like, this is a young girl, 18 years old. Like, she's 50, so 55 something, right? And then the imbalance of power where he has, famous guy with lots of money, these types of things. And so, he put himself in a shitty position doing something that's kind of seedy and gross in the first place. But, he's throwing this guy he calls a friend under the bus for his own benefit, right? And, talking about how he's above that kind of thing, like at the same level.
Right now. I'm talking about what people say when it comes to people like myself and others who unapologetically explain that we have people to answer to.
Disney. That's the thing. He's owned by Disney. And he had his questions about the vax. Kyrie Irving came out and said the things he needed to say. And, which, it's like this thing with Kawhi Leonard, who Stephen A. often hammers because he has, not a big personality. He's not outgoing. He's not he's not performative like Stephen A. Smith is here. He's not an actor, Kawhi Leonard. He slams him for being great player, but not a good brand. But he's talking about his brand. It's all bullshit, right? It's all the bullshit he can get away with or do that Disney doesn't give a shit about, right? And the things that Disney does give a shit about are, the Disney is a seedy fucking company that's corporate owned. And, he wasn't going to go up against Pfizer or something, one of Disney's sponsors.
And all you folks out there with your own podcast, running your own operations, if you have advertisers and sponsors, get what? You answer to somebody too.
You do. He's saying you're owned by these people. And so they control what he says, which means he doesn't speak the truth. Like, it's a truth that he'll speak whatever Disney allows him to say or not. And gatekeepers. And so, that's an admission from him. Before I get to going back to the beginning of this video and talking about that, in terms of like these bad things that people do to each other and the things that people have to endure and how that translate to a divine plan and divine purpose. But first, like, I don't know, I seem harsh or hard on some of these people. I say things that are, I believe to be completely accurate and truthful. They're opinion based, but they're pretty accurate, right? And, they could be harsh or whatever it is. But, I don't care about it. Like, I don't dislike these people. I often don't have much of an opinion about them. I mean, I have my preferences and who it's easier for me to watch, who it's easier for me to cover, who it's easier for me to like or dislike, these things. But it's very mild because what I don't know is whether they're doing their best or not, right? Like I know for myself when I'm doing something that I'm like, you could do so much better. Again, I'm not a perfectionist. I don't beat myself up over mediocrity or sloppiness in my work, whatever it is, whatever I'm doing in life, farming and things. Sometimes I'm just doing my best, right? Like it's, I could make a little bit more effort and there's things that I can correct. When my wife asked me to close the drawers while I'm cooking, so I don't get stuff in there, because, I do things in a sloppy manner sometimes, whatever. But some things, they're just how a person's designed or built. I make mistakes that, even when if I put enough effort into correcting them, it would suck all the energy out of me. There's things that I just don't do very well, things, clerical things, and, there's just things I'm not good at, and those things I can do, and I can do them, good enough, not as good as somebody who's good at them. I can do a passing job. But the amount of energy it takes me to do those things, it's just too much. But there are things that I can correct, right? There's things that I could just do better. I made this mistake over and over again. And, I keep on making this mistake or these mistakes. And, there's things like that. And so for other people, I can't answer what their best is. Maybe if I knew them better, we're around them, I could say, well, that's probably them doing their best, right? I don't know if Stephen A. Smith is doing his best, or Shannon Sharpe is doing his best, or Pete Hegseth is doing their best, right? Or Donald Trump. But the thing about Trump and Hegseth is they've taken on jobs that are above their abilities. When I talk about not being a master, like comparing myself to Master Chargy and other masters of the system, it's because I, at this point in my existence, am not ready to make the commitment to be on that level of service to God. I can be very clear about that. Maybe even in this later on in my life when I'm, older, I'll be more dedicated, whatever it might be. But right now, I'm just not into it that much, right? I'm very passionate about my relationship with God, and what I've developed in the Sizemore system has gotten better over the years. But I can see a difference where I just don't have maybe the natural talent or the natural compulsions. I mean, I'm just not there yet, right? And if I was put in that position, I would fail. People have said they wanted me to be president. Like some of my viewers joked, Paul for president, but I know that I would do a shitty job as president. I'm not good at administrating. I'm not good at being out in front of people. I wouldn't be good at speeches and these things. I mean, just, rallying people and all the shit you have to do as a politician, I'd be horrible at. I mean, I'm not designed to do a good job. So, I wouldn't take on a job that I know that I would suck at, right? And both Pete Hegseth and Trump have done that. And for whatever reason, there are people who have ambition for things that they're not capable of doing. And so, they're accountable for that, right? They have to be. You have to be accountable when you take a job where you should know that and then once you do it and you suck at it, be honest and just withdraw your name and resign. And say, yeah, I'm not up for this, right? I thought I'd be good at it. I'm not, right? I suck. But, they're not going to do that, and they're not going to be honest with themselves. Shannon Sharpe is good enough at his job that he's getting promoted. He's making money. I don't like what he does. I don't like listening to him, but lots of people do. Stephen A. Smith, the same thing. But Shannon Sharpe is doing things that, are self-destructive things. Dating 18-year-old, I mean, it's like a high school girl, like fucking, and these, and I'll get into that more as we go through, but, basically a prostitute, right? And then, putting yourself in that position, whatever he did or didn't do, and that's, again, like he's good enough at his job, but then doing extracurricular things that interfere with what you're doing. But what Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharpe both do is they shit all over people, right? Oftentimes young men making mistakes, making mistakes off the court, these things, and they're very harsh on them, for the same kind of things that they're doing. Stephen A. Smith is always slamming guys who throw teammates under the bus, coaches who throw players under the bus, people not taking responsibility for their stuff and, doing what he just did to Shannon Sharp, right? Making himself look good at Shannon's expense and showing and saying how much better he is at being a company man, being, a slave to Disney, because that's what you are when they dictate your opinions and what you can and cannot talk about, right? And then, all the rest of it. And so, like there's a failure there. And I don't know if they're doing their best, but, that their best sucks, right? Like, that's what I'm saying here. Like, if that's your best, well, then you have to aspire to be better than that. Like, it just, in terms of who you are as a human being, you're publicly displaying. I mean, he's giving this lecture about basically, not in the sense of don't indulge in things like dating an 18-year-old. Don't do it because you work for Disney. Like it's that you might want to do it, which is fucked up. You might want to, not have a good relationship with a woman your age where it's goes beyond some sort of forms of prostitution where she's using you for your fame and your money, you using her for sex and whatever else, trophy wife, whatever, trophy girlfriend, whatever it is. Whatever you guys are getting out of each other, it's kind of fucking greasy, right? It's based in money and other things like that. But in this thing, people have to assess whether they're doing their best or not. And, is there hidden potential? There's always hidden potential. Can you rise up to a higher level? And if you take responsibility for something, you should do it at the highest level you can do it, right? You should always be looking to improve and, just get better at your job and your life and your relationships, being a dad or a mom or a husband or wife or, citizen or whatever it is. Like improvement, it's got to be there. Because if you're not improving, you're regressing.